Hello, everybody. Welcome to Therapist Thursdays. I am so excited about today. I'm also sorry, just doing all the streams at once. It's very. I don't have a producer yet. Just you wait one day.
Technology.
So much technology is happening right now. But anyway, I'm excited to be joined today by Nia Meadors, who is just a fantastic human and clinician. And yeah, why don't you tell the people all about you and what you do, or what you're.
Thank you. So, as you mentioned, I'm Nia. I'm a therapist in private practice, and I do a lot of work with people who have experienced a lot of suffering, have experienced just lifelong trauma, and I specialize in helping people navigate those traumas, especially as it interferes with how we show up in the world, and how that influences just different cultural aspects and systems of oppression. So that's what I've been working on.
Whew,
Yeah,
wow. Like,
outside of like the advocacy and social justice work. Yeah.
I mean, the world is so lucky to have you, especially right now. Yeah, I mean, I always love to ask therapists, like, how did you get into this line of work? What was your journey to becoming a therapist?
Just being a consumer, right? Like I spend a lot of time talking about the things that I've personally been through. So, as someone who has been in therapy forever and needed all of the services to figure out how to do all of the things, there was this turning point where it's like, okay, maybe I could do this. Maybe I can teach people how to help themselves in the way that I did, and huge emphasis on and the way that other social workers and other therapists have helped me. um, Something that I like to say is I've really been reparented by the people who I'm in community with. And I just want to be a part of doing that for other people. And so I was like, okay, put on my big girl pants and go to graduate school, I guess, so I could do this.
Go deeply into debt for a thankless profession.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what.
Amazing. I can never tell if anybody is actually here or not. So if you are here, please let us know. Send us a comment. I think we'll see it. I hope we'll see it. If not, we're just going to keep talking. Nia is somebody I love to chat with about all things. Sometimes I wish people got to see our warm-up conversation before we go live. We would be like spitting gems out there. But yeah, so I'm curious, in this world we live in, I wonder if you've sort of seen changes to things that your clients are going through in the last, I don't know, let's say since January or thereabouts.
Yes, there has been a major change. Like, honestly, like we are all really suffering. We are all really suffering. And I think this is really just highlighting not only the individual traumas that we experience, but also vicarious trauma, because I am witnessing a lot of people suffering because we know that people around us are going to experience the worst of the worst. And we're all here just sitting in our own helplessness. What do we do with that? What does that mean when someone is going to go through the worst of the worst and I can't do anything about it? In fact, the unknown, I don't know how bad exactly it's going to get. And so people are in distress, having to sit with, I had a conversation with someone recently, where, their friend came up to them and asked, if anything, if the worst case scenario happens to me, like, can you watch my children if I'm gone? You know what I mean? Like, people are losing their jobs and at risk of being unhoused and not knowing what's next. Like, where can I stay? What can I do? Social services are being cut when we already are living, with the bare minimum. We unfortunately made the mistake of living in California where it is just, unreasonably priced. Everything is. And so we're experiencing a lot of suffering and just getting further and further away from tapping into the resilience that is in there, but with so few opportunities of just seeing the reminders that we're capable of that, it gets dark. It gets really
Ooh,
dark.
you said like 1,000 things I want to follow up on. You
Yeah.
raise a really interesting point, and I started telling you about, my thesis in grad school was vicarious trauma and compassion fatigue, and you raise a really interesting point of there's the folks that are most impacted by the changes that have been going on and most in danger of all kinds of things. And then there's the people who are witnessing it.
Yeah.
And then there's the people who are, healers and helpers who are carrying their own feelings, and then the sort of witnessing the suffering of others. And it's either the direct suffering or the suffering about the suffering.
Yeah.
It's sort of like really complex. And yeah, I mean, I don't know that we talked about going there, but I'm curious if you have any thoughts about how you're taking care of yourself in all of that.
Yeah. Yeah, good question. It's so interesting because lately, after like there's been a few people at the end of the session, they'll cry and tell me about like just all of these horrific things that they have been through. And then they'll ask, like kind of wipe their tears, like, how do you do this job? Like, what is wrong with you? Where you can just sit and listen to these things all the time. And the thing that I like to remind them is that, like, hey, I'm human. Also, like, I'm feeling all of the things with you. And sometimes that just looks like, if I need to cry too, I'm going to cry. And I'm not going to feel shame about it. I'm human. I think also what I mentioned before, I'm talking about what I know about, right? So I like to do a lot of healthy modeling. And what that looks like is you're in therapy, but I'm also in therapy too. So I have that time to kind of just be and sit in my feelings about just how hard the world is, and sit in my own helplessness. As I wish I could do more, but I can't exactly do more. There's only so much I can do, sort of feelings. On top of just the self-care like hobbies that I do, where that's just being in my garden while my dog is like following me around and my cat is like giving me the stares, like, hey, why aren't you letting me go outside too, sort of thing. I just started sort of like a fitness journey, so that's helped me really like be in my body and be in touch and grounded in myself, and helping me sort of like have some level of separation between my work life and also like my personal life. But also I'm just always thinking about like my body, and how can I do like that physical healing? And part of that is like kind of asking for help, whether that's, a partner, support system. Hey, I just need to be held. Hey, I just need you to listen to me. Don't give me any feedback. I just need to be heard. Those sort of things are just really healing for my body, and always trying to find ways to do that, especially if I'm noticing, hey, something's up, something's not right. Let me tend to this sooner than later.
That's so powerful and beautiful, and yes, yes times 1,000. What's so funny is the folks I've had on this live thing so far have been a dance movement therapist and an
Okay.
expressive arts therapist who's a dancer, and it's kind of been a recurring theme of just taking care of your body, moving your body, doing what you can to feel. There's like for me, there's a sense of like unsafety is just kind of all around. And so what does it feel like to try to feel as safe as I can in my body,
Yeah.
and healthy as I can in my body? Yeah, so that's just a theme. Interesting. Yeah, and I love you said something really amazing, and it just totally like slipped my brain because I have perimenopause brain, and I'm just going to keep using that as an excuse forever. Like,
It's not an excuse, and we are not putting enough research into just how important that is to our bodies, because we don't prioritize women, but that's a separate tangent that
oh
I
yeah.
won't go into. But yes, that is a big deal. It is not an excuse.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I'd love to do a whole, but anyway, yeah, one thing we're talking about sort of scooting around about before we went live is sort of the nexus of the work that we both do. And I always think of companies as microcosms of our bigger society. And so when there are things emerging in our bigger society, and when the folks in power are doing certain things, we seem to see that replicated in companies.
Yeah.
And one way we're seeing that right now is this sort of attack on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And just knowing the work that you do and the lens that you bring, I'm curious, what you're seeing from your clients, how some of that is impacting their mental health, and it's just anything you want to say on that.
Yeah, I mean, impacted our mental health, of course, right? Like if we spend the majority of our day at work and that place is not pleasurable, we're not enjoying that, that's going to impact us, right? Especially because, I specialize in systems of oppression, right? There's just a lot of, it just really is de-emphasized how oppressive work can be, right? Like a place that really thrives on ableism and capitalism and patriarchy and you know what I mean? Like, and white supremacy, right? Like all of those things that make it difficult for people to be their authentic selves in those places. Again, the place where we spend the majority of our wake hours. That's a problem, right? And what does that do for our identity, right? We're experiencing identity confusion because we're in these places that we feel like we should be lucky to just be invited. But also, we can't be our authentic selves because we're supposed to perform professionalism or whatever that means, right? So it's difficult. That's impacting how we feel about ourselves, how comfortable we are in our bodies, and just time, right? Like there's something about, having the privilege of time freedom. If I'm spending so much time there and it doesn't feel good to my body, doesn't feel good to my nervous system, um, how does that influence how I show up in the rest of my life outside of work, even?
It's exactly why I do what I do.
It's important. Yeah.
I saw a talk by Chain Ming Ting like about, oh God, 1,000 years ago. And he said something like he was on the mission to make the world of work a better place because he knows that that ripples out into all of society. And at first I was like, that's so cheesy. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's exactly what I want to be doing. And it's so true. And, you framed it as like a space where people don't feel pleasure. And I would go even further and to say a space where people are actually actively being harmed
Yes.
and and how they're processing that and taking that and into their everyday lives. And something else you said, this concept of the authentic self, which I feel like is something that gets thrown around a lot. I know back when I used to work for companies, there was this like, you must bring your authentic self to work, and I always sort of felt a little uncomfortable with that because on the
Mm,
one hand, I want to be me and the human that I am. On the other hand, there's parts of me that like my work life doesn't get, like they're
yeah.
sacred to me, or maybe I would be unsafe if I articulated them here. So there's like a lot of caveats to the authentic self, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it sounds nice, right? Because these workplaces are putting us in a situation where they are saying, hey, but we're a family here. It's safe. Come on, sort of thing. That's just not true, right? There are certain expectations. And we say, perform professionalism, but like to really align with, this Eurocentric standard, right? So me being in this Black body, how can I be my authentic self if I'm here and having to code switch, if I'm here having to literally speak a different language in order to coexist with you guys? But, my reward for doing that correctly is a pizza party, right? We don't want to miss that pizza party. you know
Mhm.
um yeah, it's impossible. And I think about like here's where like our family systems sort of intertwine with that. A lot of us have been conditioned to do work in the right way, where whether we come from immigrant families and there's this extra responsibility of it's your responsibility to make it, right, to be successful, to do well in this education and in this work world, so that you can kind of like carry this legacy, honor our name sort of thing. Or if we're trying to do the opposite, right, like we are family members didn't model success, whatever we deem success to be, or having longevity in the workplace, and we're trying to do the opposite, and we're just like really chasing sort of like success or climbing the ladder, even though it's detrimental to our health. We feel like that's our responsibility, and that's been fed to us all the time, right? I think about even being a millennial, right? We were taught you have to go to college. It doesn't matter what you go to college for, but you have to finish. And now we have all of this crippling debt, and we're still in jobs that make us miserable, but we were taught that was the only way. That's the way that we have to do and how we have to participate in life. That was modeled to us. we get further and further away from what feels natural to our bodies, what feels natural to, our minds, and just no longer aligns to our value system, and we don't realize it.
Oh
We're
my God.
lost.
Yeah. Plus 1 million to everything you just said. Like, absolutely. Um, it's so interesting. I think about that too. And I've had clients who are navigating their desires and wishes and hopes for their dreams, especially as related to what their peers of their generation were doing, and the expectations placed on them by their elders, and where exactly they fit in. And then you just like heap a company and the power companies have over employees onto that, and it's just kind of a messy soup for some people.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, even myself, I have a history of being unhoused, right? And so, unfortunately, I have a lot of problematic capitalist views where it's like I'm, doing the cultural things like hustle culture and you got to chase the bag, like all the things that we're saying, right? But the reality is, because of my extreme poverty trauma, I'm in here trying to do everything so that I can never have that horrific experience again. And that just adds additional pressure on top of the narrative that was told to me. I remember I was in middle school when, my grandmother was first telling me, like, hey, I owned a house at 19. What are you doing? I'm just like, trying to color, I don't know. It's just, it's our whole worlds are about, having to sort of be successful and in this society that looks like work, right? Like what our careers look like, what our families look like. And it's hard to kind of escape those expectations.
Yeah. Like, can we give a day-long seminar about this?
Exactly.
Yeah. It's so tricky and challenging, and I think it often leaves like people really confused and exhausted, and there's this I think sometimes burnout is around like I'm not using the gifts that I want to be giving, or they're being exploited, or I mean there's just all these things that happen to us, and then I think like I get really mad when companies are like, we're gonna have resilience training, and I'm like, are you willing to change any of the systems that are causing any challenges for people? Because if you're not, and you're just kind of making it a them problem, it's like it's an individual problem,
Yeah.
then you're gaslighting people, and they're already carrying all of this other stuff on all these other pressures, and yeah.
Yeah. And that's why I talk about like how trauma doesn't really live in a vacuum, right? Like it is everywhere. It could be in the workplace. It can be, you use the term gaslighting, right? It could be like that medical gaslighting that we experience where we have to like overextend to prove that something is really going on with me in my body, right? Like to the doctors, or, in our religions where some things don't feel aligned, but we're taught to not question those things. Like it is really everything and everywhere where we're just conditioned to just accept the status quo. Just shut up and do the job, and be quiet, fall in line, because that's what we're supposed to do. Like the thing that we're taught all the way since elementary school, right? Stand in line, be quiet, do what you're supposed to do. And we just have gone along with that forever. Some people spend their whole lives doing that, what they feel like they're supposed to do, again, until it becomes impossible. And then what does that do to our identities when we can no longer play the game, right? Again, that internalized ableism kind of comes up, right? Or ageism sort of comes up when it's, I can no longer do, I can't make it. Does that mean that I'm less than? It shows up everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, when you said trauma lives everywhere, I was sparked into thinking, and something you said earlier about, I think sometimes if you've had a challenging experience with your own family,
Mm.
sometimes that gets replicated in your experience at work. Sometimes you inadvertently choose situations that put you into familiar territory, which maybe
Yeah.
was painful territory. And so sometimes the work that I do is helping people sort of see how they're replicating patterns that they've learned at an early age. And every time, a company says, we're like a family here, I'm like,
Yeah.
no, please don't ever say that.
Yes.
Like,
Don't be like my family, first of all.
Right?
That's dangerous. That's threatening language, right, for some people. And I think about like my experience growing up where there's a lot of like household dysfunction, household trauma, and then you don't even recognize it is abnormal until, you're at school, you're on the playground, and you're like, wait a minute, like your family isn't like this. Wait, we're not supposed to be doing this. And when we're not recognizing that appropriately or not pushing back, we get into these environments, whether that is like friendships or intimate relationships, workplace, or providers even, that just mimic that same thing, but it's comfortable now. I don't know it's a problem because I never learned that. So again, we're just going with that status quo, and we get stuck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you were queen for the day, it would honestly be the best day ever, but, if you're queen for the day and you could help companies do better, what would you wave the wand and, make change in the environments?
That's a good question. Something that I would say is just having a little bit of flexibility. It sort of reminds me of how I work with individuals in my private practice. Like, I don't just come up with, here's one modality that I'm going to use. And because I really like this one, hopefully it fits for you because that's what I'm going to do for everyone. Like, we really get to, or I really get to figure out what works for that individual person, and have some flexibility to figure out like how I can get them there, how I can make them succeed. And I think they try to like pseudo mimic that when it comes to like annual reviews and stuff, like how can I help you and stuff like that. But we just know they're not being genuine. They're not being authentic. In fact, that comes off as more of a threat, right? We have to play the game in order to get the positive review, as if there's some sort of incentive other than like a gold star. And even they even, say, well, we can't give you perfect because, that wouldn't be right. And that wouldn't give you room to grow. Right. So we're just constantly chasing something that isn't attainable. Right. And so just more flexibility and like individual support, right? Like let it be okay for us to speak our own languages, to go at our own pace. Something that we were witness to during the pandemic, where all of a sudden we were forced to be flexible, right? We were forced to do things in a different way. We're now kind of clawing back on that. But what we found is some people actually excelled with that difference when it came to the workplace, and productivity went up is what we were finding. And so when we're not doing that, what is that about? Is that about needing to micromanage? Is that about needing to have control? Is that about needing people to fall in line? And if that's the case, recognize that, yeah, this is just another oppressive system.
Oh, yeah. Yes, yes. Okay, I nominate you for queen for life, but, if you want it.
I'm
Um
of my own, so I'll take that. I'm fine with that one.
But something that when we're talking about like when we all went to remote work, one thing we found is it was more accessible for people. Another thing we found out was that people were experiencing less microaggressions in the
Yeah.
workplace. And I feel like that conversation just went away. It's like, okay, now there's a return to work. So are we gonna talk about how when we were not in the office, certain people were experiencing less microaggressions, and now we're just gonna go back and not take care of that?
Yeah. Yeah. I had a coworker that was, I just, not even microaggression, full blown aggression. Like they were singling her out because she's in, wearing this like Muslim garment, she's in this black body, and coming just so close to even like calling her the N-word, right? In the workplace. These people with professional degrees, right? In this professional setting. Um, I found out about that, and literally the next staff meeting, we're talking about how we're all a family and how we could, what I mean, uplift each other, and how there's this push to, we should do more things together. We should have potlucks and have our meetings come back to in person, not recognizing for some of that, actually, no, that's a threat. You know where I don't experience microaggressions? At home here with my dog. You know what I mean? Like, and so having the freedom, the physical space and safety to have a break from that, has been a big deal. And yeah, it does feel like a threat when we're being forced into environments that just not only don't serve us, but don't feel right. And now we've had the experience that we've got to feel something other than that threat, that constant fear, that constant, like, why are my shoulders all the way up to my ears? Why am I being paranoid that I'm talking too loud or saying the wrong things? These environments aren't really safe in the way that they're supposed to be, and getting to experience that, no wonder people are hesitant to kind of go back into these environments.
Yeah, 1,000%. I mean, I feel like there's a whole other thing we can talk about all day, like the return to work and just the intensity with which some companies are coming out with that, and refusing to acknowledge that, we have a whole bunch of workers who are caregivers for either elderly folks or sick folks, or they themselves have, physical mobility issues or challenges or health issues, or they're caregivers for their children. And we when we allowed for some flexibility, we got to have people feeling like that was one thing off their plate.
Yeah,
Like maybe it was that I didn't have to commute, or maybe whatever that was. I had more access to be able to take care of the person I needed to take care of. And so that we're failing to address that, is the kind of thing that keeps me up at night. But anyway, I digress.
which brings up the point, right? Like, that we've had more opportunity to actually be in community. And so that just feels different too, right? Like, on my downtime from work, I can not only, like, go to the grocery store if I need to, sort of, but I could see other people. I get to have breaks from just like sitting in front of the screen or being in this little cubicle. That is healing for the body too, because I believe that, ancestrally, that's what we need. We need community to kind of thrive on, to keep us going. But in this, hustle culture, we don't have that, other than this pseudo family that we experience in the workplace.
Yeah, 1,000%.
Yeah.
When I was kind of like early in my activism days, I was kind of looking around in the Bay Area, and I'm thinking about all these things that were happening to people. And I'm like, where were their neighbors?
Yeah.
Oh, their neighbors were on a tech bus to a different campus in a different city.
Yeah.
And then they come home late at night. I have no idea who lived near them.
Yeah.
And for a minute, the sort of height of the quarantine gave us an opportunity to like actually sit in our homes and be around the people around us
Yeah.
and maybe get to know them, maybe share resources, which was a thing that was really, I think, was missing in the world. And now, again, we're just like, oh, well, good lesson, goodbye. Like, we're
Exactly.
moving on.
Yeah. Yeah. And people are losing their jobs for just
Mhm.
this, right? Like, not making that transition in the time frame that they're supposed to make it in, which is again designed to pull us away from the community, to separate us from understanding that, hey, better is out here. Actually, your life doesn't have to always be about that hustle culture sort of thing.
Yeah. One thing that I've talked about with some friends, who are also kind of redesigning our careers and our lives to better work for us. So we end up not spending as much money because we're not like trying to fill a void. We're like, I have more energy to cook, so I don't need to like get DoorDash all the time, or like I don't need subscriptions to things that I don't care about because I'm busy doing other things, or I don't need to like look on Amazon to buy a thing that I don't really need, but it makes me feel
Yeah.
better because I have the ability to buy it. So anyway, just another observation I've made. We just have a couple minutes left, and I would love, for you to have a chance to tell people how they can work with you, a little bit more about who you love to work with. You mentioned you've got so many modalities at your fingertips. So anything you'd like to share about working with you?
Yeah. So, something to know about me again is I do a lot of trauma work, and we spend a lot of time trying to recognize that trauma isn't only abuse, right? Like, it can again happen anywhere. And so, kind of just putting ourselves in a position where we get to reflect on that, get to own and name that, which is uncomfortable, especially in certain communities. But I am also trained in modalities and in therapy techniques where we can even do this non-verbally, right? Which is something interesting that, the therapy world is sort of moving towards, where when these things are uncomfortable to name, what can help us get closer there in this like less oppressive sort of way, especially because there's this different positionality and power dynamic when it comes to even being in the therapy room, even if that's a virtual room. So again, the people that I work with know a lot about suffering, know a lot about oppression, whether that's medical trauma, cultural trauma, all of the isms. And we can just talk about that. We can just be there and explore that and figure out how to navigate life in a way that moves a little bit closer to your values, a little bit closer to healing. You could find me. I'm everywhere, honestly. Like just Google my name and you'll find me. I think about some of the free resources that are available that I have been developing is I have a blog that I put out every single month, every single week. So I do like a newsletter every month to kind of highlight what I've been working on, some of the things that I've been thinking about. You can find my blog at moodandmindjournal.blogspot.com. I'm also on social media, so you can find me on most of the social media platforms at Mood and Mind Therapy. And yeah, on my blog, you'll see my newsletter linked there, so you can just figure out what I'm up to and what I'm thinking about. So
Awesome. And I'll make sure to put all of that in the sort of notes in the event. And one last thing, we're a little bit over, but I hope that's okay. I'd love to ask you, what do you wish therapy consumers knew about therapy, the business of therapy, any of that stuff that you can tell us?
that's a good question. Something that I think about is that healing is so possible. And I think that, again, now in this cultural difference in cultural climate, systemic sort of issues that we're experiencing in policy right now, we feel further and further away from that. But I have been able to witness people that have just given up. They don't want to do it anymore. They want to, kind of the language you talked about earlier, they want to opt out and get to a place where they're just comfortable in their minds, comfortable in their bodies, and they're ready to just do the damn thing. And so it's possible. It is really possible if we're willing to do the work. And just showing up is okay. And I think about the work with me. Show up as you are, even if that means your pajamas, even if you're in your bonnet, all the things, right? Just be here and see if we can make a difference.
Mm. Whew. Well, thank you so much. It's always a joy to talk to you, but I'm so excited that people got to hear from you too. And thanks for hanging out with me for Therapist Thursday.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
All right, I'm going to end the stream.